Let's explore this further now and speak to Sophie Mokoena, SABC News International Editor, who's joining us live now. Thank you so much for your time, Sophie. I mean, while we see the numbers in terms of the results, but they do tell a story. And I wonder what story are the results telling us, especially when we look at the ANC, for example, since 1994.
Well, clearly, as the professor there or doctor there, a former ambassador of the African Union to the United Nations, pointed out, it speaks to what South Africans are saying, that we cannot continue to be in this situation. After 1994, the mandate was clear that we want a better life for all. But it looks like we are not arriving at that. Indeed, it was derailed at some point in time. Now, to go back to recover the lost ground in terms of ensuring that you do ensure that citizens of this country are all happy, it looks like it has been a challenge for the governing party. However, clearly, the governing party still has a huge number in terms of when you look at what's going to happen in the National Assembly. They have numbers. 40% is a big number that you can't ignore. 6 million is a big number that you can't ignore. When you look at the DA was able to capture the lost ground by clawing back people who went to the Freedom Front Plus. And therefore, they were able to consolidate their base. There's no growth. It's a question of getting back people who left because they were not happy at a particular time. When you go to the EFF, yes, they've lost, but when you look at the people or the parties that they were competing against, these are all established parties. MK might not be a new established party, but the name MK, the brand MK, but also led by a former president of the Republic, a former president of the ANC, while the EFF has got much younger generation, and therefore them dropping to the fourth position, but being able to consolidate their base was still perhaps a performance. And of course, going down, you can see that the issue of the national question came in when you look at the Patriotic Alliance and what they stand for. And of course, business as well had influence in terms of what needs to happen. As you can see, some parties that are pro-business made it to parliament.
And especially, you know, Sophie, when you look at some of the agreements that must be made now, as well as the concessions possibly that may need to be made by different political parties to even form a coalition, even at a national level, against the backdrop of President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that put the need of South Africans first, because this is what the results are telling us. So let's talk about that, because that is also important as they go into these conversations.
Well, when you look at other countries where you have a coalition government or coalition government, you will see that you have to compromise. Let's take a country like Germany. At times, you are able to get a almost central type of government with the coalitions. At times, you get a party that is more lenient to the right, as it is the case now. And therefore, it speaks to much as nobody is comfortable with the right-wing system or beliefs or norms, but you have to find a way to deal with those who believe in that principle. Ensure that you are able to manage that expectation of making a country to go more right, by ensuring that there are issues that are non-negotiable. And secondly, as you heard, some parties in South Africa, the priority is a respect for rule of law, a respect for the constitution, which often govern the coalition government or governments in these countries that I've spoken about and where I spoke to the different ambassadors. But in South Africa's case, it goes back to the continent, the challenges we have on the continent where the African majority is being left behind is a thorny issue that you have to be sensitive to. And therefore, as they discuss, clearly this speaks to they must be sober. They must understand that no one got an outright majority. No one. And therefore, no input is insignificant. And therefore, if you approach the negotiations in that form, you will be able to agree on a particular way forward. But you heard the president, he's clear. He wants a more inclusive government this time around so that you can build and rebuild trust, but also use this moment to unite South Africa, because South Africa is very divided, and this fragmentation is leading to tensions, and the opportunistic view then prevails.
Briefly then, when it comes into, of course, what you've just said, which is quite important, and listening to the German ambassador there, that build trust and also make sure that you level the playing field, as we now are hearing, you know, some of those people that you've spoken to in that particular story. But when it comes into some of these areas of concessions, it also becomes difficult, especially when some of these parties are going in there already demanding positions.
Correct. However, they must know that that's not going to help. At the end of the day, they will have to sacrifice and also make concessions. If you don't, then take a position to be an opposition and hold the government accountable. You heard what Helen Zille wants. You can hear what the DA wants. They thinking of not being in the government, but rather occupying those strategic committees in government where you can hold the executive accountable. Even the issue of judiciary, you know, it has been a thorny one, how the Judicial Service Commission is constituted, reduce the influence of politicians, and then you are able to hold government accountable. And therefore, even the issue of presiding officers, give a speaker to an opposition, a powerful opposition that can be able to ensure that the NA, the National Assembly, is able to be more independent and not just toe the line, a party line. And if you have a speaker that is not from the party that is leading the executive, you will be able to do that. So it's going to be a tough one. And I think people are watching other countries as we speak. They are checking with other countries. Lesotho has been very unstable because of this issue of their proportional representation. If you don't manage it well, and you can hear in Europe, these countries have traveled this road for more than 50 years, and therefore they have been able to find a way to deal with this.
Quite interesting insights there, Sophie. Thank you so much for your time. And what the DA's Helen Zille is saying is also quite important when you think about oversight and what we even heard coming from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry in that particular matter is concerned. So thank you so much for that. That's Sophie Mokoena there, SABC News International Editor.